We're going to talk about our Live with Ryan Wunderlich. We have two of these this year. This one's the first one. And we'll get right into it. So those of you that have been here before, great that you've already know this. The rest of you who don't, just a little bit about me. I've got over 36 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. It's actually 37 this year, and I kind of groaned when I realized that it's 37. I'm currently one of our senior support specialists here at IMAGINiT. So if you have technical support issues and you reach out to us, there's a good chance you can get me. I currently teach AutoCAD. Well, I've taught AutoCAD as a certified instructor. I also teach Civil 3D, InfraWorks, and a bunch of other stuff. I've had over 15 years in CAD management, over 8 years in cruise ship building, over 5 years in supporting civil survey and landscape architecture before that, and I've worked in pretty much everything except aerospace and automotive, but I've done most everything else, and I have a bachelor's in business management and a master's in organizational management. So that's a little bit about me. Now let's see, we've got two pieces on the agenda today we're going to cover first, and then we'll have live Q&A after. So the first thing is we're going to cover Windows 11 and some of the challenges one may experience with older versions of Autodesk products and which versions have been approved. This one was submitted by Tom from Aora Simmons. I hope I pronounced that right. And the difference between CTB and STB plotting and how to change it, that was submitted by Ron from DLZ. We do ask for feedback. We do ask for questions, and I'll show you that slide at the end. You can email Lori Elliott with any of your questions. And what I try to do is I'm looking for things that are more AutoCAD specific. I did get a lot of questions that seem to be more verticals like Civil 3D, AutoCAD architecture, etc. But I would like to see more just AutoCAD generic questions that we can answer and get handled. And then after that will be a live Q&A with any topic or question you have. And Lewis, there's one question here. Will there be any discussion for AutoCAD LT users that are using the Mac platform? I am familiar with AutoCAD LT for Mac. I do not have a Mac, Lewis, so I can answer some of those questions, but that might be something where we might want to have a specific AutoCAD LT for Mac webinar. And if we need to do something like that, I can probably coordinate something like that because I know a guy. So we're going to get into this. So Windows 11 certified versions and challenges. So Autodesk has approved all AutoCAD based products. So that would be your AutoCAD Electrical, your AutoCAD Architecture, Mechanical, Map 3D, everything that's AutoCAD based except Civil 3D for versions 2021 and newer, provided you have updates. Civil 3D, this is the big one. Civil 3D is certified only for 2021.2.3 or higher, 2022.2.1 or higher, 23 and 24. So if you're running 21 or 22, you have to run the Civil 3D and the AutoCAD updates in order to be Windows 11 certified. Inventor is 2023 or newer. Revit goes all the way back to 2019, again, provided you have installed all the updates. And 3ds Max is only 2023 and newer. So if you were using some of these products, be aware that some of them may not be Windows 11 certified. That doesn't mean you can't run them, but that means you're running them in an unsupported environment. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about certain challenges. So generally we assume 2023 and newer is good. Anything older may be once you have all the updates installed and applied. The Autodesk website always will tell you if it's valid, where it says Autodesk 3ds Max 2022 is only supported on Windows 10 64-bit. And where it says see that product lifecycle, support lifecycle for support information, this is where there's a little information that they're very gray and nebulous to get to, but what that means is that always bear in mind you have to confirm the build of Windows as well. Currently there are two versions of Windows 11, 21H1 and 22H2. 21H1 will hit end of life on 8 October of 2024. So until then, Windows 11 21H1 should still be supported by Autodesk software that supports Windows 11. Windows 10 is a little slightly different. As versions drop off support, they are no longer supported. They may still run and work just fine, but specifically you've got to be aware of your build version. Now, let's talk about some of the most common issues and challenges. The first thing I'm going to talk about is never assume the video driver is good. Even on a brand new machine, never assume that. Always get the newer driver from the card maker's website and make sure to choose Windows 11 driver. What I find is a lot of people have Windows 10 drivers and not Windows 11, and that does cause some issues. And even then, in some circumstances, DirectX 12 does not work. You get odd graphics behaviors. So you'll have things like part of the screen disappear off the bottom where your crosshairs disappear on like the bottom third or the bottom quarter of the screen. You'll get artifacting. You'll get things when you switch layouts or do things where you have to type regen all to get things to come back up. So if you're experiencing those type of issues, we want to turn off DirectX 12 and revert back to DirectX 11. So we do that by typing in GFX DX12 and set that to 0. That's a system variable, so you only need to do it once. And most of the older products have tie-ins to Internet Explorer, which is not included or installable on Windows 11. So for the unsupported versions, this can lead to problems. It's especially prevalent in Civil 3D when you are trying to do something, any of the reporting or anything like that that you're trying to run, tries to run on an Internet Explorer shell. Without the updates, it just will outright fatal error and usually crashes your software. So you want to make sure that you do have those updates. And other considerations, the big one here is do not do an upgrade in place from 10 to 11. I always want to start with a clean OS and rebuild, and I know I hear the groans already. The reason why we do this is this can leave remnants behind of 10 that cause confusion on 11 in some of the Autodesk software. So if you are being prompted to upgrade to Windows 11, I know it's going to be one of those things, but I suggest you wipe everything and start over with a clean install of 11. That's one of the big ones. Now, some of the other things that I see regularly, user permissions can change, and this may cause the product to not run unless launched as administrator. This is more of an IT side issue, but be aware, the user permissions are slightly different between 10 and 11, and that can cause some issues. ARM processors, if you're not familiar with an ARM processor is, some of the newer Surface Pros come with ARM processors. They are not supported for any Autodesk software at this time. And the big one is the Web Edge view. This is what ties the Autodesk software into Microsoft Edge as opposed to Internet Explorer. It's built into Windows 11. When you have Web Edge view issues, you either have to run a repair or update or downgrade in some cases the version, and you have that ability where you can upgrade or downgrade that version. The first time launch under a local user, if you've installed as an admin and you turn around and log back in as the user, and it will fail and it will tell you things like either it will just come up and tell you that it's missing a config file, or it will tell you that while your computer meets specifications, it can't run. It's usually missed or incorrect registry keys. The secondary installer doesn't launch, and you have to use a workaround to get the secondary installer to run. I know what that workaround is. It's not terribly complex, but it does require some thought process and some familiarity with the registry editor. I'm not going to go into that because that's more of a troubleshooting thing, but I just want to make you aware when you run into this, this is something you need to be aware of, that we do have ways to get around that. And usually what happens is if you install as an admin, especially under Windows 11, there are different sets of permissions that are applied to the software and where the installer media is. And it is not populating the keys for the local user when you log back in, which causes the secondary installer not to launch, which causes some other issues. Now, some of the other things. When you launch the software, no, Thomas, there are no issues inherent to using a 2023 Autodesk program on Windows 10. Just make sure you always have your updates. Now, the other thing that we've run across a few times here is that if your default browser is Chrome or Firefox, the first time you launch the software, especially 2024, which now requires to open a web browser in order to authenticate and then send you back to your software, sometimes you have to reset Edge as the default browser in order to get that process to trigger correctly once, then you can switch it back to Chrome or Firefox and it will work just fine. And the other big one is plotting to older devices. First thing you should do is update to Windows 11 drivers if they are available, and this usually requires IT intervention, especially if all of your plotters are being run on a server. And you really want to update the driver to a more modern one. Generally, I recommend PCL types. If you're running old HPGL2 drivers, they are not going to function well, and you are not going to get the results you want. Sometimes PS drivers or PostScript drivers are your other option. And in some cases, depending on the age of your plotter or the device you're plotting to, you're going to be forced to plot to a PDF and then plot the PDF out of Acrobat or Bluebeam or AcroPlot or any of those others directly to the plotter. Those are most of the main issues that we see in Windows 11 certified versions and a lot of the challenges. These are most of the challenges we run across on a regular basis in support. So I hope that answers that question for everyone. All right, now let's talk about the big one, CTB versus STB plotting. This one's the fun one. So CTB plotting is color-based, hence the C in CTB. And basically whatever the object shows as a color using the AutoCAD color index, it will print using the CTB assigned for that color regardless of the layer it's on. So anything that's magenta will always be plotted with whatever you have magenta set up to regardless of the layer it's on. STB, which is style-based plotting, which is the S in STB, whatever layer the object is on, regardless of color that object is, will plot using the assigned style for that layer. Okay, so this is a mind shift if you want to think about it, is what you see on the screen color-wise for color-based, what layer that object is on for style-based. So CTB plotting. Oh, don't worry, Lewis, we're going to get there. Not only do I have an example, a visual example for you, but I'm actually going to show you. So CTB plotting, this is what AutoCAD started with. The color of the object is displayed on the screen will determine the color, line weight, etc. assigned to the CTB plot style table. You have to ensure that your objects are assigned the 0 through 255 colors. That's the AutoCAD color index. So when you go to change a layer color or an object color and you see this select color box, if you are on the index color here, this is called the AutoCAD color index or ACI, it has to be one of these colors. If you note that any color is a true color, in other words, it shows number, comma, number, format, or color book, always plot in color when using CTBs. So if it's not one of these 255s, or it's really 1 through 255, if it's not one of these colors, it will always plot in color using CTB. STB plotting. So this was initially released in AutoCAD 2000. This gives you the ability to assign a plotting style to a layer, regardless of the color of the object on that layer, and color overrides too. So you can get around the color books and the true color and force the objects to plot using the specified plot style. And how you can tell the difference when you open up a drawing and you go to the layer dialog, if you see a plot style in your layer palette, you are plotting STB. If that plot style is missing, you're CTB. That's the easiest way to figure out. So, general observations, when to use CTB or STB? And this is one of the big things I talk about to people, is that it's entirely driven by your standards. It's what you want at the end of the day and how many layers you have. With STB, every layer needs to be assigned a plot style. If you have hundreds or 1,000 plus layers, this can be very tedious, especially if you're dealing with XREFs and all of those things. Just something to keep in mind. It's not unmanageable. It's just something you have to be aware of. If something doesn't plot correctly, then you have to see if it's on the wrong layer, since it's all layer controlled. And this is the big thing, is that some Civil 3D objects have issues when set to STB plotting, namely fittings in pipe runs, starting with, or in pressure pipes. It's fittings in pressure pipes generally plot to the color of the object, not the layer that it's on, because it's inheriting the color from another layer. Sometimes we can get around that just by changing the color of the layer to black and it will plot correctly. But just be aware that some Civil 3D objects do have some issues when set to STB. This may also apply to AutoCAD Architecture and AutoCAD MEP. And I know that because those are all because of the AEC base engine that's running on Architecture, MEP, and Civil 3D, there are some nuances to STB plotting, so just be aware. And STB plotting in general is harder to manage at the beginning, but works well when it's managed properly. So the other general observation, CTB is always the easiest to get started with. This is what we all cut our teeth on. Those of us who, have neck beards and have been around a long time, it's always the easiest to get started with because the color you see on your screen, you can change that and make it plot how you want. Since it's all color based, if it looks like the wrong color on the screen, it will be the wrong when it's plotted. If you overwrite a color of an object, it uses the color you overrode the object to when plotting to determine what to plot it as. And it's easy to manage with a lot of layers. CTB is not necessarily the default. Beru, it's being driven by your template. So whatever template you start with is what is driving whether or not it's CTB or STB. And I'll give you an example of that. All right, our electrical and standard seem to be linked when it comes to layers, where electrical has a ton more layers. If you can, how do you separate them? Are you using basic AutoCAD or AutoCAD electrical? Because AutoCAD electrical has its own sub-driving layer mechanism and color scheme, and there's a little more work to do to get that to work. So that's one thing to be aware of. So the big thing is if you're color-based and you need to go to style-based, or if you get a style-based drawing in your color-based shop, we need to do some things. So in order to convert a drawing, if you use CTB plotting and get an STB-based drawing, we type in convert P styles to change to a color-based plotting. That's pretty much it. Now, if you use STB plotting and need to convert a CTB file to STB, the process is a little more complicated. So we first type in convert CTB. We select a CTB at the base, and I always use the monochrome CTB and save it as converter.stb. This will create a mapped STB that you can use for all future conversions, so you only need to do this once. And then you convert P styles, select the converter STB, and it will change the drawing to STB using converter. Then you can assign your company standard STB and go through and assign your plot styles to the layers. I know that sounds like a lot. It's actually not terribly difficult, and I'm actually going to walk you through that. All right, so now we're going to get into some demonstrations here. All right here. So I have a CTB and an STB drawing. So this one's color-based, and how we figure this out is if I go here and I want to start a new drawing, you'll see that I have my standard DWTs. Anything that just says DWT typically is color-based. Anything that says named plot styles is style-based. Okay, so you want to start with the correct template based on what you want, or somebody needs to set up a template. And you're going to see I have all 4 of these objects are on layer 0. I have this object, which is colored by layer, which is white. I have this object set to our ACI, or our Autodesk color index, set to blue. This one is a true color, which is 62,193.99. So this is a true color value. And this is actually a Pantone color book. Okay, for those of you that have never seen that, color books over here. So if you guys have company standards and you have logos and things like that, and somebody gives you Pantone colors, you can actually assign Pantone colors based on this. You have a whole list. So you have DIC colors, you have Pantones, and you have RAL colors. Okay. So if I go to plot this, right, and I'm just going to do a general AutoCAD PDF, and I'm set to monochrome CTB. So if I edit my monochrome CTB, you're going to see that all of my colors are supposed to plot black at 100% screening. And if I preview this, these 2 are black, these 2 are not, because these are not ACI colors. This is where color-based plotting gets you in trouble. So I just want to show you that. So if somebody does something like this, or if you guys deal with microstation drawings that come in, microstation drawings are almost always in true color, and you have to convert those to ACI if you're color-based printing. Otherwise, they'll always print in color. So that's CTB. So if we go to STB, and I have the exact same lines here, so this one's 0, this one's blue, this one's 62, 193, 99, and this one's Pantone. And if I go into my layer index right here, right? So here's my layer palette. You're going to see that my plot style is black. And if I come back over here to my CTB example, you'll see there's no plot style up here. So if I come back here, I can select anything I want. Do I want it to plot black? Do I want it to plot normal, 30% screening? Do I want to plot color, etc.? These are just from the Autodesk color STB. You might have your own here, so I can pick a monochrome, etc. But what I'm going to show you is that if I do this here, and I go to plot, and I preview this, they all plot black. Joshua, that is an excellent question. If you are plotting STB, can colors be overridden in the viewports? You don't want to override the color in the viewport, you want to override the plot style. So let's actually talk about that. So in here, I open up my layer dialog, and you're going to see I have two things here. I now have a plot style, and now I have a viewport plot style. So if I want to set these to plot at maybe 50% screening in this viewport, I can set just that viewport to, right, because I'm not in the viewport now. And if I go to plot, and I select that, and I'll select that, and I'll preview. And now you're going to see those are set in color to 50% screening. Okay. So you can set that by viewport for layers. Hopefully that answers your question, Joshua. All right, Sharon, you have a new issue with CTB files. I did not change anything knowingly, but some of my line types do not plot if the line weight is too thick, like any line type which is not continuous, such as dashed, etc. All right, that I'm not sure of. You might also want to, in your CTB, let's go over here in CTB. And if we edit our CTB, you'll probably want to check, make sure that the line type is using the object line type, because I can force specific line types here. I can force everything to solid. I can force everything to dashed for red color, etc. So you probably want to check that. And you may have some drawing settings that are not quite right. And that's something we'd have to look at. Dana, so would STB be a good choice for large companies? It seems that layer STB would be tougher for a user to change as opposed to a user changing object or layer colors. I'm going to be honest with you. I am a big fan of CTB because I know it's WYSIWYG. What I see is what I get. STB, I believe, has a good time and a place for large firms, especially civil or architect firms that do have a lot of layers, and especially everything being driven by AIA standards and things like that. I'm a little leery unless you want to go through the process of setting up every layer that you could possibly use and making sure you have that. That's, make sure you have things set like that. But once you've got it set up and working correctly, it should be very easy to manage that from that standpoint. And I understand where you're coming from for new users and things like that. So let's see, hang on. And we use a CTB file called monochrome CTB, which prints everything in black. Most of our layers are set to AutoCAD. A few layers are set to RGB colors, which CTB does not recognize, prints them in colors. We use this for items like standout, like rev clouds. Yes. That is exactly the process. If you need things to stand out in color, you want to set a true color. In other words, you want to set something that is number, comma number, comma number, and it will always print in color with CTB. Can the STB change line width? That is a good question, Paul. So in here, when we're talking about STB plotting, our plotting here is you're going to see color and screening and line weight. So I can use the object line weight that's assigned to the layer, or I can force specific line weights. So yes, we can use STBs to do this. So if I change my, because I have all of these to, let's see, I think I set these to plot black. So if I come in here and I go to my AutoCAD color and I change, I have to come over here and find my black, and I'm telling it to use the object line weight. If I want to, I can set that to 0. And if I save and close and preview, they are still thick because that's being driven by plot object line weights. So if I uncheck my plot object line weights in preview, they're still thick because it is not changing that. So that is something to be aware of, is that STBs don't necessarily follow the rules for things like that. And we can probably look at our layer. Now these are polylines with a thickness, which is why they're plotting this way. If I just had a regular line, they should inherit whatever this STB is telling it to plot. Do we have a significant difference between the AutoCAD PDF PC3 and the DWG to PDF PC3? Steve, I'm going to circle back on that. I actually have a blog, I don't think it's been posted yet, where you do get different behaviors when publishing when you're using DWG to PDF versus any of the AutoCAD general documentation, etc. There is actually causes a difference when publishing. And that's because the DWG to PDF is using a slightly older technology driver build, and the AutoCAD PDF with the parentheses, general documentation or whatever is an update, and that one actually I find works better in most cases. All right, so we are at the point where we are going to go from STB to, or we're going to go from CTB to STB. Let me go back to my slides. All right, so we're going to go convert CTB first, and then we're going to select our CTB as the base, and then we're going to go back through this. So we're in our CTB, and we go convert CTB. It's going to ask me to pick a CTB, and since these are all monochrome, I'm going to pick monochrome, and I'm going to hit open. Now it's going to ask me to save this, and I always call this converter. And I'll show you why in just a second. So now I'm going to label this as converter because this is my converter, and it was successfully created. So what I want to show you is when I come into my plot dialog, and I'll do this in the STB, if I click the down arrow, you're going to see converter has this little glyph next to it. If I see a glyph next to an STB, I know that that is a style that was converted, and I can use this for all subsequent conversions of CTBs. That's why you only have to do this once, but you can't do it with any of the out of the box. You have to actually have to create one. All right, we're going to cancel that. We're going to go back here, and now we're going to go convert P styles. And it's going to use this. And it's going to ask me to pick it. I'm going to pick converter. And now this is a style-based drawing for plotting. So I can assign Autodesk monochrome, right? I'll apply. I'll hit cancel here because now I need to go back to my layer and I need to change my plot style. Come down here and I'll go to black, or I'll go color solid. There, I'll go solid. Oh, that's my monochrome STB. I selected the wrong STB. Let's go here. I just want monochrome STB. Where was I using? Right, and black. I don't know why it says it's missing. It shouldn't be. All right, monochrome. Go back to mono. Solid. Okay. Right, because I now have a plot style in my layer dialog, and now when I go Control P and I preview, they're all in color because I haven't changed that. Let's go back and modify mono. Solid should be printing black. Now I need to check these because in some cases we don't get something plot style. We're going to assign that by layer. Now, and I go to plot, plot's in black. So we can convert this fairly simply, right? And to go from STB, so we're in an STB now, we'll go to CTB, we go convert P styles, we click OK, and now this is back in color-based mode. And again, we can assign monochrome CTB, we preview it, and again, 2 blacks, a green, and an orange. All right, what is the best DW, or what's the best to use to generate the smallest PDF from the drawing? Well, let's talk about this. So you have general documentation, highest quality print, smallest file, and web and mobile. So these all rotate around what you're, so if I look at general documentations, I'm plotting vectors at 1200 and raster at 4. If I look at high quality, 2406. If I change to smallest file, you're printing 400 and 200 DPI. So smallest file will give you the smallest PDF without terrible loss of quality. Most of your standard laser printers are 600 DPI. They can be higher enhanced, but honestly, 600 DPI even on your screen is probably good. And that's the one I would use if you're looking for the smallest possible PDF. I generally steer people away from the web and mobile just because it has a lot, it's the same 400, 200, but it's got other things like layer information, hyperlinks, and bookmarks. So if you need hyperlinks and bookmarks, then this one, web and mobile, and the smallest files should be identical, other than the fact that you have additional data, which adds file size. And Michelle, you brought up an excellent point. I showed you this information. You should always start your project with one type, either CTB or STB, and continue until you're done. You never want to convert a project midstream from one standard to another. The reason why I showed you converting STB to CTB or CTB to STB is sometimes if you get drawings from outside your organization, they may use a different standard and you need to convert them so they plot correctly. Is there a way to plot a dumb PDF? Topo drawings are a beast. That's a good question, Sharon. I'll be honest with you, the best way to plot a dumb PDF is to probably get something, probably not use the out of the box and use something else like Acroplot, Bluebeam, Come to Mind, QPDF, something that strips all the vector geometry out and turns it into just a dumb raster-based PDF. So that's CTB and STB and the differences and how to go from one to the other. So Q&A time. This is your opportunity. You can ask me questions about anything at this point. What else do you want to know? What else do you want to see? What do you want me to go back over? So we should have a questions panel. I always plot to PDF, but do a D size plot. 32 by 24 is not a print size. That's correct. So Ben, what you're talking about here is when we look at our standard print sizes, you have 22 by 34, not 24 by 32, which is an ANSI size, and then you have the Arch D, which is 36 by 24. So the question is, are you trying to plot Arch or ANSI D size? And we need to make sure you're getting the right one, Ben. AutoCAD layer properties on the ribbon will not update or change a selected item's layer. That sounds to me like you have, it's not a technical issue, or it's not a drawing issue. It's probably something to do with a profile. So if I create a new drawing or a new layer, right, new layer, and I'll make this yellow, right? And I go here, I go back to home and I change those to layer 1. That's what it should do. If it is not doing that for you, Jimmy, most likely you have an AutoCAD issue. You're either missing updates. If you've migrated your settings forward, my previous webinar talked about what to select when, or actually that was my AutoCAD webinar. I think it was my February one. If you can find the link to the February webinar and post it in the chat for me, Lori, I'd appreciate it, where I talked about what to do when migrating settings. If you've migrated your settings forward from an older version, you may have inadvertently migrated the CUI as well, which can cause problems. If you reset your settings back to the default, that should correct that problem, Jimmy. Is there any way to strip out a lot of unneeded lines from an imported drawing? There's a couple of things. So I personally like Overkill, which will do that, which will try to strip out a lot of that. That's one option. There's other options, like I actually have a couple of Lisp routines that go through and do a little more aggressive cleaning. The other thing I like to do is I'll do Q select, and I will try to select things that are concurrent, or I like to get rid of things that have very small things. Like if I'm dealing with a large drawing and I see every screw, nut, and bolt and things like that, I'll get rid of everything that has, you know, an arc radius of 1/4 of an inch, because you'll never see that on a drawing and things like that, to help clean some of that up. But that's more of a process flow, but it can be done. All right, David, for older Windows versions, we have Windows 10. Are you recommending Windows 11 drivers for 10? No. David, what I'm recommending is if you're running Windows 11, make sure you have Windows 11 drivers. If you're running Windows 10, make sure you're running Windows 10 drivers. Let's see. The example is a scale drawing that has every little line drawn. I'd need to see that, Perry, and I can probably give you some ideas behind that. So what is a PMP? That is an excellent question. So let me grab my, right? So percent app data percent Autodesk 24 R23 ENU plotters. So you have your PC3 files here, and you have your PMP files. So what your PMP files actually are is when you go into your plot dialog and you modify any of these properties, like add a custom paper size, modify paper sizes for printable area, turn on or off paper sizes so you only see what you want. That generates that PMP, because that PMP stands for the properties for your printer, for your PC3. And so if you copy your PC3 over to somebody else's machine and do not copy the PMP, they will not have any of your settings. All right, when getting a new laptop, I always have to go through all the setup. Is there a way you can carry those over to a new system? That's an excellent question, Michael. So if you are going from same version to same version, so let's say I'm on AutoCAD 24 right now and I get a brand new machine and I need to transfer everything over. I will come down here to AutoCAD 24 and I will have an import and an export. I will export all of my settings, and I have to do this with AutoCAD closed, but I will export all of my settings. When I export all of my settings, it will ask me to create a zip file. I'll create that zip file. I'll take the zip file over to a new machine that has 24 installed on it. I'll launch it, make sure that 24 is up and running. I will then close 2024, and then I will import my settings here. And the two machines will be identical with only a couple of very minor tweaks. There's a few things that don't come over, but most of your settings, about 99% of your settings do. If you load Lisp routines, so for example, if I go into app load, I have my startup suite here that I run this. This will be loaded here, but you will have to go into your app load and you have to load this once in order for it to work on the new machine. And that's it. Running Windows 10 Civil 3D 2024 with a new GPU and counting visual drops and IE crosshairs and dims. Regen works, and I've tried the GD or GFX DX12 and still happening. Any thoughts? Joseph, that's going to be, I haven't experienced that. You may have something else underlying. We may have to do things like reset settings to default. We may have to go through and tweak a couple of settings for visual performance in both the Windows environment and in the Civil 3D environment. Sometimes that helps. We also need to see, is it with all drawings or some drawings? You might have something in one of the older drawings that's causing you the trouble. That would be probably where I would start troubleshooting that. Daryl Hammonds, can you lead me to someplace that I can get help with a printing issue? Well, Daryl, if you are a customer of ours, you need to open up a case at support@rand.com and we will get someone to help you. And if you are a customer and you need to be as specific about what kind of printing issues you're having, and then we can help address those. If you're not a customer of ours, then typically your best bet's to go to your reseller to see what's going on. And again, that's usually what we recommend. What are the best settings to plot an aerial to a PDF? I work in Civil for rows to make it as small as possible. All right, so we're talking about an aerial image. When we are in here, this raster image quality is going to control your aerial image. So the lower you make that and still have it acceptable, the smaller your PDF is going to be. So I would probably try Amanda. I would probably go in and try, first off, I would go in and probably try the smallest file and see if the aerial image in the background is acceptable. If it is, then I would work off of that. And what was that command? Which command, Thomas? Are you talking about color command or are you talking about the convert? So what's going to happen is that I will send out this as a PDF to Lori, so you guys can request that from her. And once she'll send you the PDF, and then you can go back over the recording once it's live. All right, Jimmy, you've probably got a bigger problem if you've reset to default and the problem persisted. You've even started with new profile. We may have to play with the graphics card configuration. Yep, try the command CE line type to set by layer for the color issue. Yep, that does work. I did cover another webinar, AutoCAD.lsp or AutoCAD.lsp, and the things that I have set up in mine. So just as an example, since I have this open here, right, where is that? All right, let's go here. All right, and raw and Lisp and all right, so let's come back over here. So these are all the things that I do. So one of the first things I do is I set CE color to by layer, CE LT scale, CE L line type, and CE L weight. And then the last thing I do whenever I open up a drawing is that it resets me to layer 0. So these are all the things that I put in mine so that I always start in the same place. So anytime I open up a drawing, I'm always on layer 0. Yes, this all works in 2023. This actually works in everything 2020 and newer. Or not 2020, 2000 and newer, although the convert piece styles I don't think was until 2000i. It was either 2000i or 2002 Kirkland when that command actually came into being. So once you started with CTB, you had to stay that way, and STB the same. But I think they built the converter into 2002 or 2004, Tom. Publishing uses DWG to PDF, shows same color lines as different in PDF, shows as intended when plotted. Yes, hang on. I know exactly why publish doesn't give you the same results as a single plot. Hang on, I got that one. And I'm gonna send you this one. I'm gonna put it in our chat. Why publish does not give the same results as single plot. And I'll also send that privately to you, Devyat. All right. AutoCAD layer properties in the ribbon will not update or change the selected items layer. Yep, we've talked about that, Jimmy. Oops. Sorry about that. Let's come back down to where I was. It jumped. All right. How do you get list below at startup consistently? What I always recommend, right? If I'm in here, always add them to the startup suite contents. That's how I get it to do that. If it's not loading consistently, you may have something that's interfering or something that's breaking along the way. I recently had a drawing that all the walls would turn the color of the current layer as the way to stop that behavior. Mark, if you're in basic AutoCAD or if you're in AutoCAD architecture, because you may have a style override or something else that's causing that. And we can figure that one out, but that's more of a technical issue specifically with that drawing. We'd have to dig into it and find out. All right. Do you recommend a PCL driver over a PostScript or an HPGL2 driver? I generally find that the PCL drivers, especially if they're using PCL 6, some of the older drivers are still on PCL 3 or 4. I find that PCL 6 seems to work very well for the AutoCAD-based products. The HPGL driver does work in a lot of cases, but as soon as you add image, like a JPEG, a PDF underlay, anything like that, it tends to cause that engine to crash with an overrun. So just be aware, there are some updates that help correct that, but in some cases you have to go with a PCL driver or you have to plot to PDF and use that. Yes, Daryl, it's support@rand.com. Let's put this here. There's that. What's the difference between setting and the profiles? Paul, I'm not sure of your question, so if you can rephrase that, that makes a little more sense, I can help you. How do you reset your settings to default? I've been using an old profile I've been carrying around for a while. Updating may be necessary. So to reset your settings back to the default, right? If we're in AutoCAD, with AutoCAD closed, you should have a reset settings here. If you don't see it in here, right mouse click, go to more, go to open file location, and there's a reset settings to default right here. There's always a shortcut unless you're installed with the deployment that they remove those. That's how you reset your settings. With AutoCAD closed, I double click on this. It's going to ask me if I want to back up my settings. I say yes or no, and then I commit it, and then it will absolutely reset everything as if I just installed. All right, how can I change the plot setting in a sheet set? You have to, that's more of a question on how your sheet set is set up. If all the drawings are either CTB or STB, you can either have overrides in there. If you've got a mix, you're going to have problems. So everything needs to be consistently the same. And you can always set up an override inside the sheet set manager. And of course, I don't have a sheet set open here. Do I have a recent? It's in docs. All right, if we come in here, right, so I'm printing the PDF and I can manage page setups and I can go to my publish options and I can see what's in here for publish. I can also come in here if I have a page setup override, which means I need to have an assigned file. Right, so we go to, oh, no, we come down here and we go to properties. If you have a page setup override file, so for example, if I point to something that has, I need to have something in here that has something. All right, we'll see if that's in here. So I set that to be my civil imperial. Okay, and now I can come in here and I can set A size, B size, D size, D size monochrome. So if you're looking to change plot settings in here, it depends on what it is you're trying to do. You can always come in here, create a blank drawing or DWT that has the override you specifically want, and then you can publish using that specific override. That's generally how I handle that when it comes to sheet sets. What version did the export and import settings start? 2012? 2012 or 2013? Somewhere right in there, because I've had it for years. I've still got it on 2014, so I know it's that. I can't send you the text file, but I can send you, I can send that, I can put that into another slide in the PDF, and I can include what I put down at the bottom of that. And I'm assuming you're talking about what I have in my Lisp routine that I load on startup. Each sheet size, okay, sorry for clarification. I was actually talking about publishing multiple sheets. Each sheet is set to a D size, but the PDF does not seem to plot D size. I do use DWG to PDF. All right. Ben, that's going to be a bigger question is when you're publishing and you're trying to publish to D size, are you setting everything based on layout? Are you setting everything, are you publishing in the foreground or background? And are you getting D size with little postage stamps? In other words, do they look like, come back. I might still have that here. Do I have that here? No, I don't have that here, but I might have it under, nope, that's not it. That's 24 because 24 fixed that problem. Let's go to 23. 23 is right. Does it look like this, where it plots the little postage stamp? And then you've got your D-size piece of paper. If so, don't use DWG to PDF. Use AutoCAD to PDF general documentation. It fixes that problem. 24, they actually finally fixed something with the DWG to PDF. It doesn't publish like this. Prior to that, it does. So it appears to be corrected, but if you're getting these kind of results when you're publishing, it's the DWG to PDF that's causing it. Does the import export of settings work in 23, 24 Civil 3D? Kinda, but you have to actually make your own icons because it's not included with the out-of-the-box stuff. But I will give you a link here. All right, and I'll send you that. Actually, I'll send it to everyone here, but Civil 3D does not come with the import and export settings. However, you can make your own as long as you know how to build a shortcut in Windows and you copy and paste this information. I'll do this here so everyone can see this as well. New to AutoCAD and Civil 3D. My current place does not have AutoCAD standards. Where is a good place to learn and develop and implement those standards? Ooh, Spencer, that's the $1 million question. I think I have a webinar on that too. Let's go to my landing page. All right, hang on just a second. And I go to my favorites, and I've got my own page. Bear with me, I'm gonna get to you here. All right, here's a link to all of my webinars, and my webinar today's webinar will show up in here. And I'm gonna send this to you as well. In one of those, Spencer, I talk about standards and why they are important and where to start. Usually if we're talking about standards, the first thing that I like to talk about is we need to have a directory structure set up that follows certain rules. We need to have a starting drawing template that follows certain rules. All of those things need to be in place. And once those are in place, then you have a moving target, and that's a bigger discussion than we can have right here. But that's one of the things, and I believe in there it talks about basics of CAD management, which covers standards and things like that. Let's see, when plotting 18 to 24 PDF, it always rotates the drawing to portrait when selecting landscape. So you're probably selecting 18 by 24, not 24 by 18. So 24 is always gonna, it's always your X direction and your Y direction. So you have X set at 18 and your Y set at 24, so we'll always plot portrait instead of rotating the landscape. So pick a different paper size or set one up that's 24 by 18, Austin. Is there a way to set the default elevation to a polyline to 0? If it's picking up adjacent elevations, set O snap Z and set that to, I believe it's 1, set that to 0. You have to do that every time you open up the drawing because it's not a saved value or variable. So let's see, O snap Z. O snap Z, gotta go. Let's see. Man, you guys are just bombarding me with good questions here today, so thank you. Export setting in the AutoCAD profile. What's the best way to change wall color and change the wall's hatching color? Again, Mark, if you're using architecture, you have to go in and change the wall style. If you are just in basic AutoCAD and you've got an export of Revit, you may have blocks or some other property overrides. I would need to see exactly what it is you're struggling with there. You do not have the import export in your ribbon. It won't be in your ribbon, it's actually in Windows here. And depending on what version you're using, Denise, is where you will or will not see it. And in some cases, like you may see import and export and migrate, you may not see reset. In some of these, you may not see any of those, which means you have to right mouse click, go to more, go to open file location to see what's in there. And then this is where you see reset. And if you have migrate custom settings, this is your import, export, and migrate from previous release. You won't see export on your machine, Paul, because we have to make your own. Missed some of that. What's the issue with DWG to PDF in 24? It looks like from my testing right now, this problem only occurs in 23 and older. 24 appears to have corrected this, 2024 when publishing. Yeah, I understand, Ben. You can't import STP step files, but if you want to export, you have to use AutoCAD Mechanical. Yep, that's the nature of the beast. And do you have multiple templates for different drawings? Example, a sign-in sheet with blocks versus a road plan. All right, and Paul, I'm going to answer your question. That's the last one I take. So multiple templates for different drawings. Yes, as a matter of fact, I highly recommend, depending on what you're doing, is that you have as many templates as you have possible disciplines. So for example, I have a customer that I've been working with on their templates, and we actually have templates for their mechanical, their structural, and their electrical. So we have 3 different sets of templates that they use. And since they are on the Canadian border, they actually use, they do projects in both Canada and US. So we have a metric set of templates and an imperial set of templates that are all set up the same. So the difference between exporting settings and exporting profiles and options. So if I export my settings in AutoCAD or Civil 3D or wherever I export my settings to, it creates this zip file. Let's see if I can get to that zip file. I have one in here, right? So here's my known good for Civil 3D 2022. And it's a specialized zip, and you're going to see in here, I have stuff from program files, program datas, and users. And you're going to see it's going to capture everything in my roaming profile here, all my data links, all of my plotters, all of my support. Basically everything that I am using that I have modified or changed, like my ACAD QE, my personal PGP, things like that. When I use the import and export, it captures all of that, and it captures not only your profile specific settings, but there are some system settings that live outside of your profile. That captures everything. Whereas the ARG file, when you come into options and you export a profile here, it is only capturing really the registry information. So this unnamed profile that you see here, and here's my registry editor, all that is capturing under HKey current user, under software, under Autodesk, under AutoCAD, under here, and this one's AutoCAD. All it's going to capture is this specific key and what's underneath it. It doesn't capture anything that's either in fixed profile, any of your dialogues, any of your variables that are set outside. Like I've got variables here that are set outside of my profile. It won't capture those. These variables will get captured for the most part if you're using the import and export. Good questions. All right, and with that, I wanted to say thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone's time and showing up, and I do appreciate everyone being here today. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.